the Conscious Style podcast, where we explore what it will take to build a better, more sustainable, and equitable future for fashion. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hey there, and welcome back to the show. I have a question for you. Have you ever wanted to make, modify, or upcycle your own clothes? If you answered yes, this episode will give you some great starter tips and tricks and encouragement on your journey. If you answered no, you might just be convinced after this conversation. Today's guest on the show is Sonya Philip, an artist, designer, author, teacher, and self-proclaimed stitch activist, a term that I absolutely love, who is dedicated to encouraging and teaching people how to sew their own clothes. In this episode, you are going to hear Sonya talk about the benefits of being able to make or modify our own clothes, advice for beginners who want to get started with sewing, how making our own clothes can contribute to conscious consumption and a more sustainable approach to fashion, what sorts of possibilities there are with making our own clothes and how this can give us more freedom, the connections between sewing skills and body acceptance, and more. As always, you can read along or read this interview instead of listening to it by checking out the full transcript in the show notes on consciouslifeandstyle.com. The show notes are also going to be linked in the episode description in your podcast app. And if you like this show, be sure to hit subscribe or follow if you're not already subscribed, and leave a rating and short review on Apple Podcasts. This really helps the show reach new audiences. Okay, now let's get going with this interview. Sonya is going to start us off here with an introduction of herself and some background on why she decided to create her book, The Act of Sewing, which is an in-depth guide to sewing simple garments.
My name is Sonya Philip, and I am an author, new author, designer, and teacher. I live in San Francisco. I'm the designer behind the pattern company 100 Acts of Sewing, and I started it as a project almost 10 years ago now, and it involved me sewing 100 dresses in a year and documenting the process. It's a passion of mine. I've tried to take it upon myself to teach other people how to sew, because making my own clothes has really had a very profound impact on my life.
I love that. Yeah, you're really empowering people to be the maker of their own clothes. So could you tell us a little bit more about the benefits of making or modifying our own clothes?
Sure. I came to it kind of a circuitous path. I learned to sew in middle school, but it never really took. I was frustrated by the process, like so many people, that I had ideas in my head and then I tried to execute them, and it never quite turned out right. I learned how to knit in my 20s, and that really became a sort of surrogate craft. And then from there, took sewing back up. And I feel that what sewing does is several things. Firstly, as you said, you're empowered as a maker, that you can make the choices, either what materials you use, the colors, and the fit. For me, primarily, it was those things, but I couldn't find the clothes that I wanted in sizes that fit me. I would go in and, I would only see very few things in my size, and I just would leave stores being really discouraged. And the other thing is that you get to realize the skill and the time that goes into making a garment. And that has several effects. That firstly, you appreciate all of that. And then also, I feel that you're more compelled to take care of those garments, that whether it's mending or just in the more thoughtful way that you care for it, either washing it less or line drying, that you're really invested in a garment in a much more kind of primary way than if you were to just buy it. And I think, the same is true that if you were to, save up and buy a special garment that was either made for you, or, anytime you have an investment, then you're more compelled to take care of it.
Yeah.
So I think that those two kind of align there.
Totally. There are definitely a lot of compelling reasons to make our own clothes. But if this is something that we are new to, it can feel intimidating. So, do you have any advice for us beginners who have little to no experience in sewing? How can we get started?
Yes, unlike a lot of crafts, unlike say knitting or crocheting, the fact that there's this machine that you have to wrestle with can be a very intimidating thing. A lot of times people don't know, you have a pedal that you push it goes, and who knows what's happening. I would say that there are lots of websites, there are books, YouTube, as well as there are various platforms that have craft classes. So, really finding out how you like to learn. I know that especially stores and other places are just starting to offer in person again. That's a really good way of learning how to improve your skills using machine. Hand sewing is something that I've started seeing people gaining more of an interest. And it's a much slower and approachable because all you're really needing is the fabric, the needle, and the thread. And one really sort of shining purveyor or exemplar of that is Natalie Channon through Alabama Channon. And she primarily works with jersey, which is knit or t-shirt material. And the benefit of that is that when you cut it, it doesn't fray the same way that woven fabrics do. So it's a little bit simpler. And she has lots of different styles and pieces, from extremely embellished to where it has embroidery and sequins and other things to just very simple sort of tailored looks. And looking on social media through various pattern makers, there's lots of indie pattern makers, independent pattern makers, as opposed to just the larger companies that was what really made up sewing patterns. And so nowadays there are many, many independent pattern makers, and you can pick and choose based on what you like. Is it just a very simple style, more complex or tailored or vintage? And so it's a really great time now. There's been a lot of interest, not just since the pandemic. Many, many people were getting out their sewing machines to make masks, and now they're thinking like, oh, okay, now what to do? Not to mention people just being at home. And I also think that people are more interested in knowing where their clothing comes from, or learning how to rework or mend things. And those two, like refashioning, I think is a really kind of a shortcut. You're not having to go immediately from taking cloth to making it into this three-dimensional object. So if you have a piece of clothing that's just lingering in your closet, you never wear it because it's just not right, then taking that and experimenting with it to try and make something that you will use it. And that could be, if the sleeves weren't ever right, shortening the sleeves, or if it's too long, shortening it. Take a dress, turn it into just a top. Those are all things that they're relatively easy to do. And you can slowly gain confidence to then maybe take the next step to actually sewing straight from pattern and going from, say, scratch.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I love that. And I've seen more and more people do that, especially on TikTok and Instagram. I think it's called like thrift flips. They'll find something from a thrift store and refashion it to make it into something different. And it's really, really inspiring to see that, because we have, so much fabric, so many clothes. So that's a really great, sustainable way of getting involved as well.
Yeah, and fabric-wise, vintage tablecloths or old duvet covers,
Yeah.
that's all, usually ample yardage, or you can stitch things together. So exactly as you said, that there is so much material out there that is not being used and would just go to a landfill. So being able to divert it is a really important thing to do.
Yeah, great ideas for beginners and more advanced sewers alike. So, I'm very curious about how your own sewing journey and your creative process has evolved since you first started sewing until now. I mean, now you're writing a book about it. So, has there been any major shifts in mindset or just your approach to sewing over the years?
Well, I just came back from teaching a class, my first in-person class in over 2 years. So coming back to that and seeing people who are beginners and comparing myself to that. And I think my process has always been through anything I do, it's really motivated from curiosity of can I do things, sort of answering these questions. And I think with sewing, it's a very rules-based craft that there are these parameters that are in place that you always put things, they say right sides together because, if you put the right sides of the fabric together and then you sew, then when you turn it inside out, all those seams are going to be on the inside. And so there are these rules there that are for a reason. And I used to sort of chafe with that and push against them. But I'm also really an experiential learner, so I have to do things in order to realize, like, oh, okay, that's there for a reason. And teaching this class, I'd see people that they're like, oh, I have to iron again. There's so much pressing involved in sewing that in order to, if you're going to fold a hem over to enclose the raw edge, you have to fold it over once, then press it, and then fold it over again, and press it a second time. And everything's like, guess what's next? It's more pressing. I swear you spend probably as much time in front of an iron than you do in front of the sewing machine. But this is something that I think when I first started to sew, I thought, I don't need to do that. And now that I am sewing, that's what I do now, I realize, like, okay, yes, this is important. If you want everything to be sewn accurately, it's this very necessary step. So I think it's coming to terms, just accepting that, okay, these things, you have to do them. And it's really, with my own journey, it's been just sort of step by step. With my pattern line, I've added garments, it's me learning how to do a particular technique and then doing it enough times so then I can explain it to people in an understandable way. So I don't know, I guess I'm a little bit evangelical in that way, that I like to just share, and I'm excited about it because it's just, as I said, it's changed my life in ways that it's like, no, I don't buy clothes. I mean, I'll buy, if I need a raincoat or a parka, yes, I'll buy that. But I haven't bought clothes just in years and years and years. And not only is it with clothes, but with other things too. I really think, do I need that? Can I, borrow it or rent it? And it's really made me sort of reassess my impact. And it's interesting that clothes and sort of stepping off that retail merry-go-round really just went and worked its way into all sorts of other aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, and I can totally see how it would evolve that way. So clearly making your own clothes has shifted your perspectives in many different ways. Something that I was wondering that I wanted to ask you about was if making your own clothes has shifted what you find most important in a garment, or perhaps what you value in a piece of clothing.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think that I was trying, my main motivation was trying to make what I couldn't find. So I was, trying to just make up for a lack. And for me, it's always been about having loose layers, natural fibers, and, some of that is just living where I live in San Francisco, just being able to layer up or layer down depending on how the weather progresses in the day. And, I love fabric. That has always been a driver. That's what brought me back to sewing, was just this love of fabric and the prints and the colors. And my eye is always turned by all the different prints and patterns that are out there. And more organic fabric is coming on the scene. It's also interesting to see recycled fabric and just seeing that shift, and also sort of a turn towards zero waste. And what that is really just, instead of putting the pattern piece down on the fabric and just cutting it out and you'd have all this leftover fabric, really there are designers where they think very carefully and try and maximize every piece of the fabric and put that into their design. And so what I've been doing more and more is thinking about, well, what can I do with these small pieces of fabric that I've left over, and not just think like, oh, we just always have more fabric. How to incorporate those into your clothes, either being panels or as cuffs or pockets. Also because fabric is expensive.
Right. So clearly, making your own clothes makes you more aware or conscious of the various elements that go into making a garment. And kind of on that note, there, how do you think that the process of making or modifying or refashioning our own clothes can help us perhaps be more conscious consumers, or how can it contribute to a more thoughtful, sustainable approach to fashion?
Well, I think first off that there is really just something about making something that's really practical. That, it's one thing if you make something and it's just like a piece of art, and it just hangs on the wall, but being able to make it and wear it and really use it, and that sort of utilitarian aspect, it really is very satisfying. And then you can't help but then it really is imbued with this like self-esteem that you made it. And then it's just wrapped up in this sort of pride of like, okay, you made it, you have these skills, and you're like, look at me. And people will say, hey, I like that. Thanks, I made it. And you just admiring glances and oohs and ahs. So I think that when you have that aspect of that, you have this like boost of that you're using your skills, and that you have that, appreciation. And what I feel is that, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or have beyond just a very basic class in college. Just, I'm sure that there's some kind of dopamine release and all those things, and I feel that outweighs whatever rush you get from shopping and buying new things, that there's a trade-off there. And it seems to last, and not just when you're shopping or doing these things that, you'll buy something and then you get it. And that the sort of excitement is that once you first buy it, and when it comes home, you're like, oh, okay, well, where am I going to put it? But making something, it has never changed. It's like, even you take it off, you wash it, you do all those things, it's still something you made. And so I think that, as I said, it's when someone once told me, and I just thought it was brilliant, that it's almost like a time release. You have this like little pills, and they say like, oh, it's time release. I've never understood how that works. But, all of your skills have been somehow sewn into or woven into this garment, and that it's just released over time. It's not just a one-time thing. And so you gain so much more from it. The gains are long-term.
Yeah, I think that it seems like making or modifying our own clothes allows us to develop this deeper, longer term relationship with our garments. I kind of think of fast fashion as one day, and slow fashion is this long term relationship, this committed relationship.
Yeah.
I think that shift in how we view clothing is so powerful.
Yeah, there's it was first a website, and it was a project. It was by a woman named Kate Fletcher. It's called Craft of Use, and it's a book as well now. But she identified several, I've forgotten exactly the term that she called, but they're use values. And she had these categories, and some of them were why, and she would take photographs of people wearing these meaningful garments and then tell stories. And when I first discovered it several years ago, it was one of these like, okay, I can spend all day reading these. They're fascinating. It was either that this was passed down to them, it used to be their mother's, or this was something that they bought while they were on a trip somewhere, or that this is something they made. So it was basically categorized these things like it was either provenance or sentimental. And why we hang on to things and what gives the clothes their value just over and above covering us and keeping us from the elements. And yeah, I really like that idea of fast fashion being just one date. Yeah, it's just you don't have any emotional attachment, and therefore you've hardly spent anything on it, and whoever's made it has hardly been paid anything. And I feel hopeful that there's now more attention and transparency to what goes into the costs behind fast fashion and the real costs rather than just like, oh, it's so cheap. So, and I really think that sewing clothes helps you realize that too, that it's like buying the material and taking the time. And you think that none of it is mechanized, that everybody is still there. I mean, yes, it's mechanized in that there's a sewing machine, but there are always hands pushing that fabric through the sewing machine. So someone is making it. And as I said, just gaining that appreciation and knowing like, okay, someone else has to do this.
Exactly. You start to see what it really takes to produce even a simple shirt, and it gives so much more awareness and connection to that garment making process. And another sort of benefit of sewing that you talked about in your book was that learning these sewing skills lets us create or modify garments to fit our bodies how we want them to. So, could you talk to us a bit about the possibilities of making adjustments to our garments or designing garments in the way that we want? And then, what sort of freedom or empowerment might that give us?
Yeah, I think that if you are falling outside of trends for whatever reason, it can sometimes feel really like you're on trapped on a desert island. That if everybody's wearing, if everything in the store is really, really long and, to the ankles, and say you're a short person and you can't wear those styles without dragging everything on the ground, it can feel that, hey, your needs are not being met. And so what I've also come to find is that at a certain age, you kind of get to know what you like to wear, and what might work at that point in time. And so many other women that I would talk to, and men included, that they just wanted to develop a uniform. So there's this idea of a uniform, and really, if you're able to buy those pieces to make the uniform or make them, then it just makes getting dressed so much easier. And it doesn't mean that, oh, you're just wearing the same thing. It could be just shirts, but they're all in different colors and fabrics, but it's just a similar cut. And that's just always what you reach for. It could be a combination, like with me, that it's a cardigan, a dress, some pants, or a tunic, and that's what I reach for. And it makes getting dressed very simple because I'm just sort of mixing and matching and pulling things in and out. And so I think that when you get to a point where, and it doesn't mean that you can't follow trends, but it's just that you're sort of insulating yourself against them in some ways. That it doesn't have to be that, oh, that's the only thing you can do. And, we're really just, what constitutes a trend is just really so arbitrary in some ways that it's like, oh, it's just like, okay, here. I mean, it seems like shoulder pads are coming back into fashion, which to me seems like so strange, but that's the way things are. And so if you really, really don't like shoulder pads, you don't have to. You can make things that don't need them. I just also feel that we have so much pressure put upon us to look a certain way, and like this is the expectation of that. If you are a person in this place and you're this age, then this is how you're supposed to look. And if you don't fit that mold for whatever reason, it can be, as I said, it can be the sort of lonely, or you think, oh, I'm not good enough or whatever. And, I think that when you make your clothes, you don't have to participate in that in the same way, or you're not beholden to it. And that is a really, really refreshing thing.
Yeah, you're not limited to the styles that are currently out there, or, yeah, what these fashion companies have decided or these fashion magazines have decided what's in season right now. And another thing that you touch on in your book is that you're not limited in terms of sizing either when you're making your own garments. And probably anybody who has bought clothes can resonate with the frustration of fit of garments, between the limited sizing, proportions that are off, or things that just don't feel good. Maybe they're itchy, they're hitting you weird in your underarm or something like that. And too often, I think we jump to this assumption that we somehow need to change our body in some way. Some part of our body is too big, too small, whatever, in order to better fit those clothes. But of course, that's ridiculous because our garments should be made to fit us, not the other way around. I mean, we shouldn't change human bodies to fit pieces of cloth, but it's really common. I hear it and see it a lot, unfortunately.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just, for me, it was I am a woman of size. I'm fat. And so it was just, if I would go into stores at the time, it would be, oh, here's all this modal or synthetic jersey, which I didn't like. I tend to run hot. And so I wanted something that would breathe, and or it would be like, oh, we're going to add lots of ruffles and bell sleeves, and I just like, oh no, thank you. And it's not just people who are tall or people who are petite or have long torsos or narrow or broad shoulders. There's so many areas where you can have, as you're saying, yeah, you can have these fit issues, and these can be addressed. Like they're simple enough tweaks if you know how to do it, or if you can make something for your body. And I have a friend that she hates 3/4 length sleeves. She just can't wear them. And so, for her, it'd be short sleeves or to the wrist. And that, if you know how to adjust things, then you can always take care of that.
For sure. Yeah, having those skills can really give us this freedom with our clothes and how we choose to express ourselves. And beyond preference or comfort, you talk in your book about the sort of connection with being able to modify or make our own clothes with that journey of body acceptance. Like, as we were talking about before, designing clothes to fit us, not changing our bodies to fit the clothes. So, could you talk about that connection there?
Yeah, that for me, and just what I gleaned from the world, was that I needed to be a certain size, or however many inches or weight, before I could get the pretty clothes. And so it was always this, as you're saying, like, your body is wrong, and so change it in order to have so much more choice and all of these things. And so by not waiting and by just making clothes for the body that I have now, I am able to have the benefits of enjoying my clothes. And so when I get dressed, I can wear things that I want to wear, that I feel good in, because they make me happy, and it's colors and playful. And that might not be true for everybody. Someone else might just want something that's monochrome or earth tones, but it's really like getting what you want out of your clothes and not waiting for it. And I feel that it always, as I said, it always seemed to be the other way around. And so here it's flipped it on its head. And it's also a way of wearing clothes that I like, that I feel good in, celebrates the body I have. And it's not hiding it or camouflaging it, or it's strange because for me, I am not, you have a lot of, I feel, people in fat activism or body acceptance where it's wearing body conscious clothing or revealing clothing or whatever, and that is fabulous, but that's not for everybody. I've never really wanted like tight fitting clothing. I always feel very constricted and stuff. So for me, it's all about loose and layering stuff that I can move around in. And I think that it's really just about having options. And if you want to wear, a tight fitting dress, then you can make that tight-fitting dress. If you want to wear something loose and flowing, you can make something that's loose and flowing. And, wear it one day of the week, wear it the other. And you have that skill to make those possible. And you're not waiting for it to come in your size. Even though things have really come a long way in the past 10 to 15 years, it still is, it's like, well, they've come a long way, but maybe those sizes are available only online. Or maybe those sizes, but they're, 10% more expensive or something. We're not fully there as far as clothing for everybody. There are some brands that they seem to be doing a really good job in addressing that, but it's still this like, well, as I said, it's not all the sizes all the time.
Right. Yeah, we still have a long way to go with size inclusivity in fashion. And that definitely could and should be a whole other podcast episode to explore that topic. But for now, we have talked a lot about the why behind your book, the why behind making our own clothes. So for those of us who are maybe now convinced or at least a bit curious about dipping our toes into sewing and getting involved with making or modifying garments, can you tell listeners what we can expect to learn in your book, The Act of Sewing? How do you walk people through that sewing process?
So the book assumes that you know how to work a machine. It doesn't go through the basic press your foot on the pedal and put the needle down, etc. But what it does go into, it talks about fabric. It talks about how to prepare your fabric before you start tracing and cutting the pattern out. It talks about, just gives you basic terminology and defines that, and what things are, like a seam and seam allowance and finishing the edges so they don't fray. And how the book is set up is that the first section is all of that introduction. And as I said, taking you through the terminology and the tools that you would need. And then there are 4 patterns. And that is, there's a top, a skirt, trousers, and a shirt. And they're arranged in order from easiest to more complicated. And then the idea is that you can just, if you make one, start it with the top and get your bearings, as it were, following the instructions. And then the next section shows all kinds of fit adjustments. So if you wanted to make things longer or shorter, if you needed to adjust the shoulders or increase or decrease the bust measurements, and just different things to do to tweak the patterns to fit however you want them to fit. And then there are other modifications. That's when I feel stuff sort of really starts getting fun and walks you through basically from like top to bottom all kinds of things that you can do as far as changing the necklines, changing the sleeves, adding decorative elements such as ruffles, pleats, or pin tucks, and then very importantly, pockets. And so, it really is all about, selecting and choosing, and really designing what it is you want to wear. And then having the tools and the know-how that is right there that you can use it as just a straight, this is how you sew these things, or use it as a reference book. It's like, how do I make this? How do I take this shirt and turn it into, like, how do I lengthen it and widen it and make it into a dress? That kind of approach really appealed to me, that instead of, because I wanted more of a timeless book, so it's really, in it for the long haul.
Yeah. And so I will put all of the links you mentioned, and of course the link to your book, in the show notes in the episode description for listeners to check out. And before we wrap up this interview, though, I do have one final question for you, and that is, what does a better future for fashion look like to you?
I think a better future for fashion is one where people are just holding on to their clothes for longer and mending them, appreciating them, refreshing them, and really treating them in the same way that they would treat, other kind of precious and well-loved objects. And that it wouldn't be something where you would just, spend $10 and then wear it a couple of times and then attempt to donate it, but essentially you're just throwing it away. And also just ways of recycling, and for me, having fabric recycling I think would be an amazing thing, and using more organic fabrics, and just general all around sustainability. And I think having people just be more thoughtful about what they're putting on their bodies.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Be sure to take a look at the episode description in your podcast app for the links referenced in this episode, as well as the various links to learn more about today's guest. For the full transcript of this episode, you can head on over to consciouslifeandstyle.com and navigate to the podcast section of the site. The link to the full show notes should also be linked in whatever podcast app that you are listening on. If you would like to spread the word about this show and help the content reach more people, you can share the episode or podcast with a friend, screenshot this episode and share about it on Instagram stories, tagging at Conscious Style. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, something that really helps is to leave a rating and review. Thank you in advance for supporting the show in whatever way that you can. For more conscious content, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Conscious Edit. In this newsletter, I share recommendations for reading, listening to, watching, and much more. To get on that list, you can head to consciouslifeandstyle.com/edit. And a link to subscribe will also be in the episode description. Thank you for tuning in to the Conscious Style podcast and sticking around until the very end. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week.